show up today. Deep down, he is an institutionalist as well.
Going to be at this administration no matter what. He was a Trump loyalist, but he is an institutionalist. He took this role as vice president seriously, and part of the way he saw it was loyalty to the president, but more importantly, loyalty to the Constitution and loyalty to the traditions, American political traditions, and that's why he's here.
Let's first pick up on this as well. We were talking about where he fits in the Republican Party going forward, if at all, how the Republican Party.
Thinking about being under Ted Cruz, and I Democrats view this as only moment possible repercussion to what happened with that riot. I think that they are dealing with the impeachment, but they have talked a lot about whether there should be serious repercussions for some of those senators that were engaged in perpetuating bogus claims about the election. And George Bush statement about the insurrection, he said he was deeply disappointed with political leaders who were, again, just questioning a valid and fair election. So I think that this idea of consequences or of accountability does not stop with the outgoing president, but we're going to see a continued conversation about the future of some of those Republicans who want to be in Congress.
You have people like Josh Hawley, people who know the law and know the Constitution, who knowingly lied. Desperate people who voted for the president, and they knowingly lied to them. That's what they did. They knew there was no way for Mike Pence to do anything on January 6th, and there needs to be acknowledged that that happened for two reasons. Because they were pursuing their own ambition, and they weren't doing a thing to try to help Donald Trump because they knew they couldn't.
He also had a solid majority of the House Republican caucus vote as well. This ceremony, it's just hard as you look at it right now and you see all those masks. I'm going to bring Jen Ashton back on this. What a sign of the times.
Absolutely, George. We have to remember it was just about 9 months ago that we heard the CDC do an about face and say that they're recommending face coverings for all lay people. We've never seen that before, and to see it now in the setting of unprecedented deaths and an out-of-control pandemic and an inauguration is just really historic.
You see double masks there at times as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to see that recommendation as well with possibly an N95 on the inner layer and another outer layer. Some aerosol scientists saying that it does offer more protection.
And now,
ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President of the United States, the Honorable Michael R. Pence and Mrs. Karen Pence.
Vice President Pence making his way out. You hear that applause there. He was leading off to the governor of Indiana. Donald Trump chose him to be vice president, resurrected his career at that time. Dating back with loyalty over 4 years, some would say to a fault, but a final break at the end. Mary Bruce, we're talking about signs of the times, not only masks on the faces of all those people on the steps today, many members of Congress wearing body armor.
George, just astounding and certainly a sign of the time. Some Democratic members are, we've learned, wearing body armor out here today underneath their coats. In fact, our reporter Ben Siegel spotted some Democrats greeting each other by sort of tapping on their chest, sort of a subtle acknowledgement that they are prepared. Because, of course, it was just 2 weeks ago. It's not just that they witnessed, this horrific violence. They were victims of it. So many who are here today to mark this transfer of power were themselves whisked away off of the Senate or House floor to a secure location. And so many members of Congress, like the rest of the country, are still reeling from this, but in a very personal way. And I have on a very indignant note, so sort one of the favorite parts of an inauguration is just to watch former presidents and congressional leaders pal around. I have to say, President Bush at the office, they appear to be having a pretty good time. It's just fun to be able to see all of them interact. The children, the grandchildren. You know, we saw Joe Biden's granddaughters there. He is so incredibly close with them. They talk all day, pretty much, in one never-ending, constant conversation. There they are, along with the youngest Biden there, Hunter Biden's baby son. But it is just such a split screen to think that you have, you know, so many coming together to mark really this next chapter at the same time that so many are still coming to terms and grappling with what we saw here just 2 weeks ago.
That's right, Mary. I want to bring in Pierre Thomas for more on that because, Pierre, every single day that goes by, we learn how much more horrifying it was inside that Capitol, inside those chambers. Members of Congress could have lost their lives.
Indeed, George. Law enforcement officials saying that members of Congress could have been kidnapped. Some of them could have been killed. I've been on the phone with sources all morning. They're talking about that every stop has been pulled. They are not taking any chances. I'm not surprised that members of Congress are wearing body armor. A couple of the law enforcement folks to include, they talked about how while there was a major security breach, they are saying that they believe they fought to save democracy. That they fought to save democracy. They have no doubt that the people that would storm that Capitol were coming in to take hostages and possibly kill people. And one of the officers talked about how many of the people in the crowd were trying to turn them against members of Congress, trying to get members of Congress. Just extraordinary. But they're watching with a lot of pride today, George, because they believe that they helped keep the unimaginable from happening.
Right. This was not just spontaneous combustion. There were a lot of elements of pre-planning here, Pierre.
Indeed, George, we are getting information that some of those charged had talked about coming to D.C. days earlier before the January 6th certification of Biden to do, quote, hunting. Law enforcement officials put out a statement to court documents yesterday that members of these groups were communicating during the actual attack, communicating through Facebook messaging, talking about trapping members of Congress. Just extraordinary. And my sources say that the more we learn about this and how challenging the situation was for law enforcement, fist fights throughout the Capitol, George. One of the officers talked about how they were in a hall full of basically smoke and tear gas, and that the crowd was coming down the hall, and there were about 15 officers who fought back over 100 people. And he said at that point he was dragged out the door, and he was stripped of his badge. He was stripped of his, ammunition, and they were yelling, "Kill him with his own gun." Incredible, George.
Alex Rodriguez right there, I believe. Yeah, right. Jennifer Lopez, of course, is going to be singing here at the inaugural. Martha Raddatz, I assume, I hope at least, the 25,000 National Guard troops are going to deter and defend against any attack today. But again, talking about signs of the times, one of the chilling ones, all those National Guard troops had to be screened for an insider threat.
They were all vetted, and in fact, George, some of them have been kicked out. Two members, they said, because of extremist statements that were found, and about a dozen others because of criminal background or criminal activity not related to extremism. But that has been a problem in the military over the years. They have fought to get white supremacists out and extremists out. I know they're going to double down on that going forward. But 25,000 members, again, these are soldiers. This is not. They can be nurses, they can be hairdressers, they can be anything, and they were all called to duty. I think you just saw Eugene Goodman going by there. They were all called to duty after January 6th. There was a very mild presence of National Guard on January 6th. They didn't want them to be in tactical gear. The mayor of D.C. did not want that look. But now they've got 25,000. And I'll tell you also, George, there are all these ceremonial military there. It's wonderful to look at those bands. There will be many more ceremonies as the day goes on. But there are seen and unseen military officers ready to respond to any kind of threat today.
And there we see Kamala Harris, Doug Emhoff, making their way down the Capitol steps. Priority when you said this means an awful lot to people like your daughters who look like her.
George, that's absolutely right. I mean, there is the power of possibility when you see someone who looks like you. Black or white, we as a nation celebrate first. We see it as progress, not a problem. Certainly some in the shells of America fear diversity. But this day, these images, George, reminded us this time, fear did not win.
Kamala Harris will make history just about an hour from now. As we see Pete Buttigieg to be becoming Secretary of Transportation, along with his husband Jason. Two vice presidents talking there, Dan Quayle, Mike Pence, greeted now by Bill Clinton.
Accompanying the Vice President-elect, the Chief of Inaugural Ceremonies, Maria Miller-Lohmeyer, the Acting Deputy House Sergeant-at-Arms, Kevin Grubbs, and the Acting Deputy Senate Sergeant-at-Arms, United States Capitol Police Officer, Private First Class Eugene O. Goodman.
Jim Goodman, Capitol Police Officer, under assault 2 weeks ago, now escorting the Vice President-elect.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President-elect of the United States, Kamala Harris, and Mr. Douglas Emhoff.
Her eyes are smiling. She got her pearls on as well. You know, her secret service code name was Pioneer. And that is just how so many see her. First woman district attorney in San Francisco, first woman attorney general in California, only the second black woman to become a U.S. senator. And all this, and just as a reminder, from a woman who was born at a time when all black women in this country still could not vote. And so certainly this is a real moment. Of course, she was gave a fist bump to former President Barack Obama. And I would imagine we're talking about the young girls. And I'd like to use Kamala's own words. So she said in the past that they see themselves in a way that others may not, simply because they've never seen it before. And as I imagine as a result of this moment, that young women and girls everywhere are going to dream a bit bigger and perhaps expect to move forward.
Hugs there for her stepchildren. David Muir, Doug Emhoff is going to carve out a new role we've never seen before, second gentleman.
And he helped choose what he would be called. Second gentleman was, of course, on the list of possibilities. He's comfortable with that. So we will call him the second gentleman. He's given up his post in a prestigious law firm out west. He will now teach at Georgetown, as Cecilia mentioned earlier in our coverage here. And his children have talked in recent days about how they call their own father their dad, Doug. They said they're so comfortable with him that they also call him Doug in the household. And they said, our parents have such a relationship. We've been married 6 years or so now, that is so connected, so tight, so close, that it weirds us out in so many words. The sort of romance that's still alive, they say, between Doug and the Vice President-elect. But they support Mala, as they call her, and it's a very close relationship, a very modern family. Kamala Harris very close to their mother. And as you mentioned, George, earlier, they've all had dinner together. Kamala Harris telling me when she talked about people knowing that she hears them, she sees them. She repeated that when she was chosen by Joe Biden. And one of the key things as we head into this historic day is not only is she the first woman to be vice president, as Byron said, children, young daughters, and sons all over are now learning in real time what's possible in America. She says she hopes to play the same role for Joe Biden that he played for Barack Obama, to be the last person in the room, a willingness to be honest with him, to tell her what she believes, but also knowing that ultimately the choice will be his.
Thank you, David. Rachel Scott, one of the fun things about these inaugurations, about these early days of new administrations, is all the new people you meet.
It is, George, and you could see Kamala Harris there taking in this moment, the daughter of Indian and Jamaican immigrants, standing there ready to take the oath in a capital where she once interned, just miles away from Howard University, the historically black college where she graduated, where she joined incorporated. On the grounds of the United States Capitol, a symbol of democracy that was built by slaves. This her moment today as well. And when she was first elected district attorney of San Francisco, the first black woman to do so, she said she walked into her office and it was completely empty except for just one chair in the middle. But George, she was so happy to be able to take her seat.
And now we're seeing President-elect making his way through the crypt into the vestibule
John Fessler, Staff Representative Stephanie Hager,
for what will be the capstone of an incredible political career.
and Staff Representative
Began with election to Newcastle County Council more than 50 years ago. Elected the youngest senator back in 1972. He will take the oath as the oldest president in 2021. There with Dr. Joe Biden. We'll be looking out over a mall that is so different from most inaugurals, as we've been saying, an empty mall. A mall empty of people, filled only with flags. Representing the Americans who can't be there, the Americans we lost over this last year of the pandemic. That is top of his mind, top of his agenda. Starting about 45 minutes from now, from the United States. If you saw the smile behind Kamala Harris's eyes, you see the sense of responsibility, I think, behind Joe Biden's eyes right now. He knows the challenges he's facing. He knows the divisions he must heal. And the first step will be when he addresses the country after taking the oath. It's starting to snow a little bit there in Washington. Klobuchar, she's Senator Amy Barber.
ladies and gentlemen, accompanying the President-elect, the Staff Director of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural
And that was
Ceremonies,
Hunter Biden,
and to over the board,
his baby,
the acting
named after
House Senate Sergeant at Arms,
his late brother.
Ben Blodgett, and the acting Senate Sergeant at Arms, Jennifer Hemingway.
The escort committee, Ted Moran, notices this escort committee, everybody in the Sergeant at Arms office is acting. That's, of course, because the Sergeant at Arms were relieved of their duty acting siege to the Capitol.
Because of that catastrophe, exploration and support of the law enforcement mission there to protect that capital. And as you did, what we're seeing is the reclaiming of that hallowed ground in our country from that violent mob back to the proper representatives of the people's democracy. They said it's our house. No, it's actually all our house. And there's a way to get there.
Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. and Dr. Jill Biden.
So like this one between President Obama, his Vice President Joe Biden, now President-elect, soon to be President. Klobuchar, she will welcome the first to welcome a somewhat more sparse inaugural crowd today.
Please welcome the Honorable Amy Klobuchar.
Vice President Pence, Mr. President-elect, Madam Vice President-elect, members of Congress, the executive branch, former presidents and first ladies, vice presidents, leaders from abroad, and a whole bunch of Bidens. America, welcome to the 59th presidential inauguration, where in just a few moments, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will take their solemn oaths. This ceremony is the culmination of 244 years of a democracy. It is the moment when leaders brought to the stage by the will of the people promise to be faithful to our Constitution, to cherish it and defend it. It is the moment when they become, as we all should be, guardians of our country. Have we become too jaded, too accustomed to the ritual of the passing of the torch of democracy to truly appreciate what a blessing and a privilege it is to witness this moment? I think not. 2 weeks ago, when an angry, violent mob staged an insurrection and desecrated this temple of our democracy, it awakened us to our responsibilities as Americans. This is the day when our democracy picks itself up, brushes off the dust, and does what America always does, goes forward as a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This conveyance of a sacred trust between our leaders and our people takes place in front of this shining Capitol dome for a reason. When Abraham Lincoln gave his first inaugural address in front of his Capitol, the dome was only partially constructed, braced by ropes of steel. He promised he would finish it. He was criticized for spending funds on it during the Civil War. To those critics, he replied, "If the people see the Capitol going on, it is a sign we intend the Union shall go on." And it did, and it will. Generations of Americans gave thought for a republic in this place. Great legislation to protect civil rights and economic security and lead the world was debated and crafted under this dome. Now it falls on all of us, not just the two leaders we are inaugurating today, to take up the torch of our democracy, not as a weapon of political arson, but as an instrument for good. We pledge today never to take our democracy for granted as we celebrate its remarkable strength. We celebrate its resilience, its grit. We celebrate the ordinary people doing extraordinary things for our nation, the doctors and nurses on the front line of this pandemic, the officers in the Capitol, a new generation never giving up hope for justice. We celebrate a new president, Biden, soul of America, and cross the river of our divides to a higher plane. And we celebrate our first African American, first Asian American, and first woman vice president, Kamala Harris, who stands on this platform, who have forged the way to this day. When she takes the oath of office, little girls and boys across the world will know that anything is possible. And in the end, that is America, our democracy, a country of so much good. And today, on these Capitol steps and before this glorious field of flags, we rededicate ourselves to its cause. Thank you. It is now my honor to introduce to you the senator who has worked with me and so many others to make this ceremony possible. My friend and the chair of the inaugural committee, Missouri Senator Roy Blunt.
Senator Clover got involved, at least there'd be a touch of snow up here this morning. Of all the things we considered, I don't think snow was on my agenda until I walked out the door a moment ago. But thank you, Senator Klobuchar, and thanks to the other members of the Joint Congressional Committee on the inauguration as we officially began the 59th inaugural ceremony. I also want to thank the Joint Committee staff and our partners, particularly our security partners, for the way they've dealt with unprecedented circumstances. When I chaired the inauguration 4 years ago, I shared President Reagan's 1981 description of this event as commonplace and miraculous. Commonplace because we've done it every 4 years since 1789. Miraculous because we've done it every 4 years since 1789. Americans have celebrated this moment during war, during depression, and now during pandemic. All three branches of our government come together as the Constitution envisions. Once again, we renew our commitment to a determined forging a more perfect union. That theme for this inauguration, our determined democracy, forging a more perfect union, was announced by the Joint Committee before the election with the belief that the United States can only fulfill its promise and set an example for others if we are always working to be better than we have been. The Constitution established that determined democracy with its first three words, declaring the people as the source of the government. The Articles of Confederation hadn't done that. The Magna Carta hadn't done that. Only the Constitution says the government exists because the people are the source of the reason it exists. They immediately followed those first three words with the words to form a more perfect union. The founders did not say to form a perfect union. They did not claim that in our new country nothing would need to be improved. Fortunately, they understood that always working to be better would be the hallmark of a great democracy. The freedoms we have today, the nation we have today, is not here just because it happened, and they aren't complete. A great democracy working through the successes and failures of our history, striving to be better, and we are more than we have been, and we are less than we hope to be. The assault on our Capitol at this very place just 2 weeks ago reminds us that a government designed to balance and check itself is both fragile and resilient. During the last year, the pandemic challenged our free and open society and called for extraordinary determination and sacrifice, and still challenges us today. Meeting that challenge head on have been and are healthcare workers, scientists, first responders, essential frontline workers, and so many others we depend on in so many ways. Today we come to this moment. People all over the world, as we're here, are watching and will watch what we do here. Our government comes together. The Congress and the courts join the transition of executive responsibility. One political party more pleased today and on every inaugural day than the other. But this is not a moment of division, it's a moment of unification. A new administration begins and brings with it a new beginning. And with that, our great national debate goes forward, and a determined democracy will continue to be essential in pursuit of a more perfect union and a better future for all Americans. What a privilege for me to join you today. Thank you. I'm pleased to call to the podium a longtime friend of the President-elect and his family, Father Leo O'Donovan, to lead us in an invocation. Please stand if you are able and remain standing for the national anthem and the pledge to our flag. Gracious and merciful God, at this sacred time we come before you in need, indeed on our knees. But we come still more with hope, and with our eyes raised anew to the vision of a more perfect union in our land, a union of all our citizens to promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We are a people of many races, creeds, and colors, national backgrounds, cultures, and styles, now far more numerous and on land much vaster than when Archbishop John Carroll wrote his prayer for the inauguration of George Washington 232 years ago. Archbishop Carroll prayed that you, O Creator of all, would assist with your Holy Spirit of counsel and fortitude the President of these United States, that his administration may be conducted in righteousness and be eminently useful to your people. Today we confess to live according to our vision of equality, inclusion, and freedom for all. Yet we resolutely commit still more now to renewing the vision, in word and deed, respect the least fortunate among us, and so becoming a light for the world. There is a power in each and every one of us that lives by turning to every other one of us, a thrust of the Spirit to cherish and care and stand by others, and above all those most in need. It is called love, and its path is to give ever more of itself. Today it is called American patriotism, born not of power and privilege, but of care for the common good, with malice toward none, and with charity for all. For our new president, we beg of you the wisdom Solomon sought when he knelt before you and prayed for an understanding heart, so that I can govern your people and know the difference between right and wrong. We trust in the counsel of the letter of James. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all, finding fault, and it will be given to you. Pope Francis has reminded us how important it is to dream together. By ourselves, he wrote, seeing mirages, things are not there. Trees, on the other hand, are built together. Be with us, holy mystery of love, as we dream together. Help us under our new president to reconcile the people of our land, restore our dream and invest it with peace and justice and the joy that is the overflow of love. To the glory of your name, forever. Amen.
I've been a longtime friend of the Biden family, former President Georgetown, as we heard.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the presentation of our national colors by the Armed Forces Color Guard, the singing of our national anthem, and for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ladies and gentlemen, here for the singing of our national anthem, accompanied by the President's own United States Marine Band, please welcome Lady Gaga.
Well, you knew that was coming. You knew Lady Gaga had to have some kind of amazing outfit.
Whose broad stripes and bright stars through the never skies, all around us we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets cracked
Scott Spaniel there. You may have ever heard Lady Gaga right there. That will be led by Andrea Hall. She's a firefighter from Fulton County, Georgia.
Welcome from the city of South Fulton, Georgia Fire and Rescue Department, President of the International Association of Firefighters, Local 3920, Fire Captain Andrea M. Hall, for the reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance.
First African woman in that department's history to be named captain.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Were you the first to endorse Joe Biden? One of his biggest wins.
What you are all about to be part of America is a historic moment of first. To administer the oath to our first African American, our first Asian American, and our first woman vice president, Kamala Harris, it is my great privilege to welcome to the inaugural stage the first Latina to ever serve on the Supreme Court of the United States of America, Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Kamala Bailey Harris, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, that I will well and faithfully discharge, the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So help me God. All right. You just heard it. You just saw what history was made. Kamala Harris taking the oath. This is first African American, first Asian American, first woman vice president of the United States. Behind her, first African American president, Vice President Pence. Lindsay Davis.
As she had her hand up to Regina Shelton, a former neighbor and family friend who she's often described as like a second mother. It's also the same Bible that she used during her swearing in as Attorney General and also as Senator.
And now, we're going to hear, after Hail Columbia, Jennifer Lopez is going to be singing as well.
Please welcome Jennifer Lopez to perform This Land Is Your Land and America the Beautiful, accompanied by members of the President's own United States Marine Band.
Lady Gaga and Jennifer Lopez both making resplendent fashion statements today. That's not resplendent. I don't know what it is. How well you're grown up. 10 years ago, you wouldn't have taken notice.
This land is your land. This land is my land. California, New York Island, the redwood forest, the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking down that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. Oh, this land, oh, this land. This land was made for you and me. Oh, this land, oh, this land. Was made for you and me. You and me. Oh,
One nation under God with liberty and justice for all. Approaching another moment. President Biden.
The sun is shining, and Mr. President-elect, this is the first inauguration in the history of America where J-Lo was the warm-up act for Chief Justice Roberts. With that, to introduce the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, John Roberts, to administer the presidential oath to the next President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden.
This is the moment.
We stand for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Joseph Robinette Biden, solemnly swear. Robinette Biden Jr. do solemnly swear. That I will faithfully execute. That I will faithfully execute. The office of President of the United States. Office of President of the United States. And will, to the best of my ability. Will, to the best of my ability. Preserve, protect, and defend. Preserve, protect, and defend. The Constitution of the United States. The Constitution of the United States. So help you God. So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. President.
Will be the 46th President of the United States. He was congratulated as Mr. President. We're officially as he's giving the address. So Dr. Joe Biden overcoming the motion in that moment, who would be? David, you're the quest of a lifetime for Joe Biden.
George, this was the ultimate long game. He was elected to the Senate at 29, the youngest. He will now be sworn in as the oldest president. He has waited and he's dreamed of this moment for so many years. He has told me the president's job is to heal a country needs healing. And he told me the words of a president matter.
Dr. Joe Biden, First Lady of the United States. The bells at Howard University will now ring 49 times for the inaugural address.
a moment we have all been waiting for. It is now my great privilege and high honor to be the first person to officially introduce the 46th President of the United States, Joseph Biden.
Vice President Harris, Speaker Pelosi, Leader Schumer, Leader McConnell, Vice President Pence, my distinguished guests, my fellow Americans. This is America's day. This is democracy's day. A day of history and hope, of renewal and resolve. Through a crucible for the ages, America has been tested anew, and America has risen to the challenge. Today, we celebrate the triumph not of a candidate, but of a cause, the cause of democracy. The people, the will of the people has been heard, and the will of the people has been heeded. We've learned again that democracy is precious, democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. So now, on this hallowed ground where just a few days ago, violence sought to shake the Capitol's very foundation, we come together as one, under God, indivisible, to carry out the peaceful transfer of power as we have for more than 2 centuries. As we look ahead in our uniquely American way, restless, bold, optimistic, and set our sights on a nation we know we can be and we must be. I thank my predecessors of both parties for their presence here today. I thank them from the bottom of my heart. And I know the resilience of our Constitution and the strength of our nation, as does President Carter, who I spoke with last night, who cannot be with us today, but whom we salute for his lifetime in service. I've just taken a sacred oath each of those patriots have taken. The oath first sworn by George Washington. But the American story depends not on any one of us, not on some of us, but on all of us, on we, the people, who seek a more perfect union. This is a great nation. We are good people. And over the centuries, through storm and strife, in peace and in war, we've come so far, but we still have far to go. We'll press forward with speed and urgency, for we have much to do in this winter of peril and significant possibility. Much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain. Few people in our nation's history have been more challenged or found a time more challenging or difficult than the time we're in now. Once in a century virus that silently stalks the country has taken as many lives in 1 year as America lost in the fall of World War II. Millions of jobs have been lost. Hundreds of thousands of businesses closed. A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us. The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. A cry for survival comes from the planet itself. A cry that can't be any more desperate or any more clear. And now, the rise of political extremism, prevent domestic terrorism that we must confront and we will defeat. To overcome these challenges, to restore the soul and secure the future of America, requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. Unity. In another January, on New Year's Day in 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. When he put pen to paper, the president said, and I quote, "If my name ever goes down into history, it'll be for this act, and my whole soul is in it." My whole soul is in it. Today, on this January day, my whole soul is in this. America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause. Uniting to fight the foes we face: anger, resentment, and hatred, extremism, lawlessness, violence, disease, joblessness, and hopelessness. With unity, we can do great things, important things. We can right wrongs. We can put people to work in good jobs. We can teach our children in safe schools. We can combat the deadly virus. We can reward work, rebuild the middle class, and make healthcare secure for all. We can deliver racial justice, and we can make America once again the leading force for good in the world. I know speaking of unity can sound to some like a foolish fantasy these days. I know the forces that divide us are deep and they are real. But I also know they are not new. Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we're all are created equal, and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart. The battle is perennial, and victory is never assured. Through Civil War, the Great Depression, the World War, and 9/11, through struggle, sacrifice, and setbacks, our better angels have always prevailed. In each of these moments, enough of us have come together to carry all of us forward. And we can do that now. History, faith, reason show the way. We can see each other not as adversaries, but as neighbors. We can treat each other with dignity and respect. We can join forces, stop the shouting, and lower the temperature. Without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. No progress, only exhausting outrage. No nation, only a state of chaos. This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge. And unity is the path forward. And we must meet this moment as the United States of America. If we do that, I guarantee you we will not fail. We have never, ever, ever, ever failed America. We've acted together. So today, at this time, in this place, let's start afresh. Let's begin to see one another. Show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and my fellow Americans, we have to be different. America has to be better than this. And I believe America is so much better than this. Just look around. Here we stand in the shadow of the Capitol Dome, as was mentioned earlier, completed amid the Civil War, when the Union itself was literally hanging in the balance. Yet we endured. We prevailed. Here we stand, looking out on the great mall where Dr. King spoke of his dream. Here we stand, where 108 years ago, another inaugural, thousands of protesters tried to block brave women marching for the right to vote. Today, we mark the swearing in of the first woman in American history elected to national office, Vice President Kamala Harris. Don't tell me things can't change. Here we stand, across the Potomac from Arlington Cemetery, where heroes who gave the last full measure of devotion rest in eternal peace. And here we stand, just days after a riotous mob thought they could use violence to silence the will of the people, to stop the work of our democracy, to drive us from this sacred ground. It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Not ever. All those who supported our campaign are the faith placed in us. To all those who did not support us, let me say this. Hear me out as we move forward. Take a measure of me and my heart. If you still disagree, so be it. That's democracy. That's America. The right to dissent peaceably within the guardrails of our republic is perhaps this nation's greatest strength. Yet hear me clearly. This agreement must not lead to disunion. And I pledge this to you. I will be a president for all America. All America. And I promise you, I will fight as hard for those who did not support me as for those who did. Many centuries ago, St. Augustine, the saint of my church, wrote that a people was a multitude defined by the common objects of their love. Defined by the common objects of their love. What are the common objects we as Americans love that define us as Americans? I think we know. Opportunity, security, liberty, dignity, respect, honor, and yes, the truth. Recent weeks and months have taught us a painful lesson. There is truth and there are lies. Lies told for power and for profit. And each of us has a duty and a responsibility as citizens, as Americans, especially as leaders. Leaders who have pledged to honor our Constitution and protect our nation, to defend the truth, to defeat the lies. Look, I understand that many of my fellow Americans view the future with fear and trepidation. I understand they worry about their jobs. I understand, like my dad, they lay in bed wondering, can I keep my health care? Can I pay my mortgage? Thinking about their family, about what comes next. I promise you, I get it. But the answer is not to turn inward, to retreat into competing factions, distrusting those who don't look like you, or worship the way you do, or don't get their news from the same sources you do. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, or rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility, and if we're willing to stand in the other person's shoes, as my mom would say, just for a moment, stand in their shoes. Because here's the thing about life. There's no accounting for what fate will deal you. Some days, when you need a hand. There are other days when we're called to lend a hand. That's how it has to be, what we do for one another. And if we are this way, our country will be stronger, more prosperous, more ready for the future. We can still disagree. My fellow Americans, in the work ahead of us, we're going to need each other. We need all our strength to persevere through this dark winter. We're entering what may be the toughest and deadliest period of the virus. We must set aside politics and finally face this pandemic as one nation. One nation. And I promise you this, as the Bible says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. We will do this together. Look, folks, all my colleagues I serve with in the House, Senate up there, we all understand the world is watching all of us today. So here's my message to those beyond our borders. America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again. Not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's. And we'll lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. We'll be a strong and trusted partner for peace, progress, and security. Look, you all know we've been through much. And my first act as president, I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of silent prayer. Remember all of those who we lost in this past year to the pandemic. Those 400,000 fellow Americans, moms, dads, husbands, wives, sons, daughters, friends, neighbors, and co-workers. We'll honor them, becoming the people and the nation we know we can and should be. So I ask you, let's say a silent prayer for those who've lost their lives and those left behind and for our country. Amen. This is a time of testing. We face an attack on our growing inequity, sting of systemic racism, climate and crisis, America and the world. Any one of these would be enough to challenge us in profound ways. But the fact is, we face them all at once, presenting this nation with one of the gravest responsibilities we've had. We're going to be tested. Are we going to step up? Boldness. For there's so much to do. And this is certain. I promise you, we will be judged, you and I, by how we resolve these cascading crises of our era. We will rise to the occasion is the question. Will we master the fair and general power? Will we meet our obligation and pass along a new and better world to our children? I believe we must. I'm sure you do as well. I believe we will. And when we do, we'll write the next great chapter in the history of the United States of America, the American story. A story that might sound something like a song that means a lot to me. It's called American Anthem. There's one verse that stands out, at least for me, and it goes like this. The work and prayers of centuries have brought us to this day. What shall be our legacy? What will our children say? Let me know in my heart when my days are through. America gave mine. Let's us add our own work and prayers to the unfolding story of our great nation. If we do this, our days go through, our children and our children's children will say of us, they gave their best. They did their duty. They healed a broken land. My fellow Americans, I close the day where I began, the sacred oath. Before God and all of you, I give you my word. I will always level with you. I will defend the Constitution. I'll defend our democracy. I'll defend America. And I'll give all of you, keep everything you I do in your service, thinking not of power, but of possibilities, not of personal interest, but the public good. And together we shall write an American story of hope, not fear, of unity, not division, of light, not darkness. A story of decency and dignity, love and healing, greatness and goodness. May this be the story that guides us, the story that inspires us, and the story that tells ages yet to come that we answered the call of history. We met the moment. Democracy and hope, truth and justice did not die in our watch but thrived. That America secured liberty at home and stood once again as a beacon to the world. That is what we owe our forebears, one another, and generation to follow. So, with purpose and resolve, we turn to those tasks of our time, driven by conviction, and the country love with all our hearts. May God bless America, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, America.
The inaugural address, Joseph Robinette Biden, now 46th President of the United States. Powerful, personal, emotional at times, delivered with command. The new president called Americans to empathy and action. He noted those events of 2 weeks ago, the siege of the Capitol, that our democracy is fragile, is precious, but it has prevailed.
Please be seated.
As I said, he called Americans to empathy, saying, we can't harden our hearts, we must open our souls, put ourselves in each other's shoes. This is Mother taught him.
Brooks to perform Amazing Grace.
Secret house of sound that stay of life. Was lost, but now I have opened my eyes. But now I see when we've been there 10,000 bright shining as the sun. We've no less days to see God's grace than when we first begun. If I can ask you to sing this last verse with me, not just the people here, but the people at home, at work, as one, united. Amazing Sing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Garth Brooks, Amazing Grace. Echoing the new president's calls to unite America. And now hear a poem from a man who wrote it. Not quite social distance there for Garth Brooks. Hugs there. Former President Bill Clinton and First Lady. Guess he can't help himself. Lord willing.
Hard not to be reminded of President Obama's singing that same song at the Mother Emanuel Church. A song that in our cultures is supposed to both poetry and come. And we're going to finish with those two things. Let me introduce Amanda Gorman, our nation's first ever National Poet Laureate.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. In the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny Black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms to one another. We seek and for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew. That even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll forever again no defeat. But because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid.
If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promise to glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. In its inception, we did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how can we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the generation, our burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left with. Every breath from my bronze pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-lit hills of the west. We will rise from the windswept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful when they come to step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Wow. How's that for a national review? Most of us will remember where we were when we heard Joe Biden take the oath of office, give his inaugural address. We will all remember when we heard Amanda Bloom speak to the world as America's first national youth parliamentarian.
Now, for our benediction, I'm pleased to introduce Reverend Dr. Sylvester Beeman, the pastor of the Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Wilmington, Delaware, a friend of President Biden for 30 years.
As a nation, people gathered in this historical moment, let us unite in prayer. God, we gather under the beauty of your holiness and the holiness of your beauty. We seek your face, your smile, your warm embrace. We continue once more in this celebration. We pray for thine favor upon our president, Joseph R. Biden, and our First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, and their family. We further ask that you extend the same favor upon our Vice President, Kamala D. Harris, and our Second Gentleman, Doug Emhoff, and their family. More than ever, more than ever, they in our nation need you. We need you, for in you we discover our common humanity. In our common vanity, we will seek out the wounded and bind their wounds. We will seek healing for those who are sick and diseased. We will mourn our dead. We will befriend the lonely, the least, and the left out. We will share our abundance with those who are hungry. We will do justly to the oppressed, acknowledge sin, and seek forgiveness, thus grasping reconciliation. In discovering our humanity, we will seek the good in and for all our neighbors. We will love the unlovable, remove the stigma of the so-called untouchables. We will care for our most vulnerable, our children, the elderly, emotionally challenged, and the poor. We will seek rehabilitation beyond correction. We'll extend opportunity to those locked out of opportunity. We will make friends of our enemies. We will make friends of our enemies. People, your people, shall no longer raise up weapons against one another. We will rather use our resources for the national good and become a beacon of light and goodwill to the world. And neither shall we learn hatred anymore. We'll lie down in peace, not make our neighbors afraid. In you, O God, we discover our humanity. In our humanity, we discover the difference of color, creed, origin, political party, ideology, geography, and personal preferences. We'll become greater stewards of your environment, preserving the land, reaping from it a sustainable harvest, and securing its wonder and miracle-giving power for generations to come. This is our benediction, that from these hallowed grounds, where slaves labored to build this shrine and citadel to liberty and democracy, let us all acknowledge, from the indigenous Native Americans to those who recently received their citizenship, from the African American to those whose foreparents came from Europe and every corner of the globe, from the wealthy to those struggling to make it, of every human being, regardless of their choices, that this is our country. As such, teach us, O God. As such, teach us to live in it, love in it, be healed in it, and reconcile to one another in it, lest we miss kingdom's goal. To your glory, majesty, dominion, and power forever. Hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. The strong name of our collective faith. Amen.
Please remain standing as the Armed Forces Color Guard retires our national colors.
Echoes of Martin Luther King Jr. there. And the benediction, Reverend Dr. Sylvester Beeman, with a prayer and a plea for unity in this country so deeply divided right now. Cecilia Vega, unity, the theme of the day, the theme of this inaugural ceremony, the theme of Joe Biden's presidential campaign, clearly going to be the early theme of his presidency. He said, "My whole soul is in this, bringing America together."
George, this was an inaugural speech aimed at uniting the country, but so much of this was speaking directly to Donald Trump supporters or those who may be doubting Joe Biden's legitimacy. He said, "We've won this. This is democracy. You are seeing it in action. It's not about a candidate. Democracy has failed." But he also used this moment to attempt to reclaim truth. We just saw an outgoing president who, by count, issued more than 33,000 assaults on the truth, mistruths, and this was about taking truth and reclaiming facts.
George, he did do that, and Larry Bruce, you're there at the Capitol today. He did not shy away from mentioning that siege of the Capitol 2 weeks ago. Told the country, told the world what we saw there would not prevail.
It was a fierce rejection of that kind of hate, of that kind of violence, as he did make this call for unity. And George, I have to say, I've listened to a lot of Joe Biden's speeches, and he talks about unity a lot. And what always strikes me is that Biden is not a man of practice. He uses unity not as some lofty goal, but as a practical necessity. And you heard that here today. He's saying to tackle this pandemic, to address racial injustice, the country's going to have to come together. When you put aside your differences and work towards some common goal, because he said without unity there is no progress. And of course, without mentioning President Trump's name, it was a clear rejection of Trumpism. I kept thinking about, that famous line that Donald Trump said, "I alone can fix it." The message today from Joe Biden was, "We alone can fix it." If this country has any hope of moving forward, it is going to take everyone coming together. And as Cecilia said, that message to the more than 70 million Americans who voted for President Trump was quite simple and very classic Joe Biden. And essentially saying, just give me a chance.
Give him a chance. He used that, folks, a few times. They just got up there and got the right part of that message. I will be a president for all Americans.
That's exactly what he was saying. And it was his main message on the campaign trail. It was the theme of this inauguration here today. And of course, it comes only 2 weeks after we saw what was an insurrection here at the Capitol. Joe Biden saying, this is a new chapter. Let's turn the page. Let's write this. And so much of this was about democracy prevailed. And when it was tested, I was the results of an election, and can't help but think about Vice President Mike Pence there, who was under immense pressure to do something that he constitutionally just could not do, and he resisted. And today, he is there for this moment. President Trump is not George.
He certainly is not. And of course, President Biden did thank his predecessors who were there today. Thank President Carter, who could not make it today. David Muir, that silence, failing to mention President Trump at all, that silence made it the most eloquent and elegant rebuke possible.
It was profound not to hear. We were told this would be looking forward, but we did not hear him mention his predecessor at all. And there was the other moment, George, where he prayed in silent prayer for the 400,000 American lives lost in just 1 year in this country, and asked that America watching today pray with him. And I'm thinking about the millions of Americans around the country watching this, the 81 million who voted for Joe Biden, the 74 million who voted for Donald Trump. And we know the vast majority of Americans did not like what they saw 2 weeks ago. They were angered by it, frightened by it, saddened by it. He said, we stand here just days after that mob tried to stop the will of the people. It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. And he looked around him on the platform to Republicans and Democrats and said, we will get through this together. Look, folks. And he turned to his colleagues. We all understand here. The world is watching. And he asked the American people, makes this all, are we going to step up? He says, I believe we will. And the imagery of what they pulled off today, the 25,000 National Guard troops who secured the Capitol, the green zone that we talk about in Iraq and elsewhere, in the Capitol, to pull this off, to send a message not only to America, but to the world, that democracy prevails, fragile democracy. But on this very important day, it prevails.
As we see Kamala Harris, the new Vice President of the United States, her husband off